There is a version of this story where Farida looks like the villain. That version exists. She knows it. She's heard it. From the aunties, from the neighbors, from her mother's church friends who called with their soft, sorrowful voices after everything fell apart. In that version, a daughter abandoned her dying mother. In the real one, a mother faked her own death to steal her daughter's life. And the thing about the real one is, it started with a Tuesday. Not a dramatic Tuesday. Nothing about it felt wrong. Farida was at work, 3 weeks out from a wedding she had been planning for 14 months. The dress was hanging in her spare room, the flowers were confirmed. Kofi, her fiancé, the man who laughed too loudly at his own jokes and showed up with soup when she wasn't even sick yet, just tired, was picking up the rings that afternoon. Her mother called at 2:17 in the afternoon. Now. Farida's mother had always been a woman of timing. She knew when to appear, when to need something, when to fill a room so completely that everyone else's plans quietly rearranged themselves around her. Farida had spent 31 years finding this charming. She had never once stopped to find it suspicious. "The doctor called," her mother said. "It's not good, Farida." That was it. That was the whole opening move. By the time Farida got to her mother's house that evening, the diagnosis had a name. Stage 3, ovarian. 6 months, possibly 8 if she responded to treatment. Her mother sat at the kitchen table, looking smaller than Farida had ever seen her. And Della had never once been a small woman. She had presence. She had opinions. She had a voice that could fill a hall without a microphone. She looked like someone who was dying. Farida didn't question it. Of course she didn't. What kind of daughter questions that? She called Kofi from the car. He said all the right things. He said, "Whatever you need." He said, "Your mom comes first." He said, "We can push the date. It's just a date. We have our whole lives." They pushed the date, and Farida moved back home. This is the part that makes people uncomfortable when she tells it now. Because moving back home sounds like a sacrifice. And it was, technically. But it also locked her into something she didn't yet have the language for. She was inside her mother's house, inside her mother's schedule, inside her mother's version of everything. She stopped seeing Kofi every day. She stopped seeing her friends. She stopped being the woman who was 3 weeks from marrying the man who brought her soup, and became, instead, a daughter doing her duty. Her mother had a gift for making duty feel like love. The first week was grief. The second was logistics. By the third, Farida was cooking every meal, attending every appointment, sitting in waiting rooms while her mother spoke to nurses in a low, tired voice, and held Farida's hand a little too long on the way out. She thought, this is what family does. She thought, Kofi will still be there. She thought, my mother is dying and I am doing the right thing. She did not think, why does she never actually look sick? She did not think, why does she change the subject every single time I ask about the treatment plan? She did not think, why did she suggest, very casually, over dinner last week, as if it were nothing, that maybe Farida should think carefully about what she really wants from her relationship with Kofi before committing to something permanent? She did not think any of those things yet, but she would, because 6 weeks in, 6 weeks into this quiet, grief-wrapped life she had built inside her mother's house, something happened. Not a confrontation, not an argument, something far smaller. Something her mother said to a visitor in the next room while she thought Farida was upstairs. 8 words. That's all it was. 8 words that didn't fit anywhere inside the story Farida had been living. She turned them over for 3 days before she let herself hear what they meant. And once she heard it, once she really heard it, the whole thing began to unravel. Let's go back, because you need to understand who Della was before you can understand what Della did. Della had been a single mother since Farida was 6 years old. She had raised her alone, worked 2 jobs, built a life out of nothing, and made sure Farida knew it. Not in a cruel way, not in a way that ever felt like a weapon, but in the constant low hum of a woman who wanted to be known for what she had survived. And she had survived things, real things, hard things. Farida had spent her whole life watching her mother turn pain into power, and she had loved her fiercely for it. That love was the door, and Della knew exactly where it was. Here is the thing about growing up with a mother like that. You learn early that her needs are the weather, unpredictable, total, and not personal even when they feel personal. You learn to read her before she speaks. You learn to adjust. You learn that the fastest way to make the storm pass is to make yourself smaller, quieter, more available. And then one day you're 31 years old and you don't even notice you're still doing it. Farida had never once in her adult life made a major decision without Della's blessing. College? Della approved. Career? Della approved. The apartment? Della helped choose it. And Kofi had been a problem from the beginning. Not dramatically, not openly. Della never said anything you could actually point to. She just had a way of asking questions about him that left a faint residue of doubt. Is he ambitious enough? Are his people your kind of people? You're sure he's ready for something serious? Nothing you could quote, everything you could feel. Farida had told herself it was just her mother being protective. She had told Kofi the same thing. Kofi, to his credit, had been patient. 3 years of patient. 3 years of dinners where Della looked through him more than at him. Of phone calls that interrupted their evenings. Of plans that got quietly rerouted around whatever Della needed that week. He never ultimatumed. He never complained outright. But Farida had started to notice the small things. The way he went quiet sometimes when she said she needed to go to her mother's. The way he chose his words very carefully when the topic of the wedding came up after they postponed it. He was still there, but he was waiting for her to choose. She just didn't know yet that she was already in the middle of a choice that had been made for her. If you've ever loved someone who made you doubt your own clarity, if you've ever stayed in a situation longer than your gut told you to because you convinced yourself you were just being loyal, stay with me. You are not watching this alone. Back to the 8 words. It's a Thursday evening, 6 weeks into Farida's new life inside her mother's house. She is upstairs changing her shoes when she hears voices in the sitting room. Her mother and a woman from the church, one of those women who appears with rice and condolences and an appetite for detail. Farida is not listening. She is just existing in the same building. And then she hears her mother laugh. Not a sick laugh. Not a tired, fading, end-of-life laugh. A full laugh. Easy and bright. The laugh of a woman who has everything under control. And then, clear as anything, in a voice Della did not lower because she had no reason to. 8 words. She'll never leave me as long as I'm sick. Farida's hand goes still on the banister. She doesn't move. She doesn't breathe. She stands in the hallway of her mother's house with her shoe half on, and she replays it once, twice, 3 times, because surely she heard wrong. Surely that sentence means something else. Surely her mother, who worked 2 jobs and raised her alone and taught her what survival looks like, would not. But it fits. God, it fits. It fits over the appointments Della changed at the last minute. It fits over the treatment plan she never quite explained. It fits over the look on Della's face the night Farida called Kofi from the car. Not grief on her mother's face. Not guilt. Relief. Farida had read it as grief because she needed it to be grief. She goes back upstairs. She sits on the edge of the bed in her childhood room, in her mother's house, 3 weeks past the date when she was supposed to be a wife. And she starts, very quietly, to do the math. The numbers don't add up. They haven't added up for a long time. But what comes next, what Farida discovers when she finally stops adding and starts asking, isn't what she expected. It's so much worse. Here is what Farida does not do. She does not storm downstairs. She does not confront her mother. She does not pack a bag or call Kofi or walk out into the evening air and scream into it, which is what every nerve in her body is asking her to do. She puts her shoe on. She goes downstairs. She makes tea, and she watches. Because the thing about hearing something you weren't supposed to hear is that you can't unhear it. But you also can't unknow what you know about yourself. And what Farida knows about herself is this. She has been wrong about her mother before, and it cost her. She has convinced herself she misread things before, and it cost her more. So this time, she doesn't react. This time, she sits across from Della at the kitchen table, and she pours the tea, and she looks, really looks, at the woman in front of her. Della is not losing weight. People in treatment lose weight. Farida has watched enough, read enough, sat in enough waiting rooms to know what the body does when it is being fought over from the inside. There is a particular kind of tired that lives in the eyes. Della does not have it. Della has the eyes of a woman who is sleeping well. She is eating, full meals, second helpings, the appetite of someone who has things to look forward to. Her hair is growing, not thinning. None of this is proof. Farida knows that. There are people who move through treatment with more grace than others. There are outliers. She is not a doctor. She tells herself all of this very firmly. And then she remembers the laugh. The next morning she asks, very gently, about the latest results. She uses soft words, concerned daughter words. She asks if the numbers are improving, whether the consultant said anything new at the last visit. Della reaches across the table and covers Farida's hand with hers. Some things are better not to dwell on, she says. Let's just enjoy the time we have. It's a beautiful answer. It sounds like wisdom. It sounds like a woman who has accepted something enormous and is choosing peace over panic. It tells Farida absolutely nothing. And that is the answer of someone who has nothing specific to tell. Farida smiles. She squeezes her mother's hand. She says, "Of course, you're right. I just worry." Inside, she is very, very still. That evening, Kofi calls. This is not unusual. He calls every evening, always has, and Farida always steps outside to take it because the reception is better in the garden. What is unusual is that tonight, she watches her mother's face when she comes back in. Della is sitting in her chair. She has a book open, but she isn't reading it. She is watching the door. And when Farida walks back through it, there is a moment, half a second, maybe less, where something moves across Della's face before she arranges it into warmth. It is not concern. It is calculation. Now, here's what Farida doesn't know yet, but you and I can already see. Because this is the part where the pattern becomes visible from the outside, even when you're living inside it and it just looks like love. Think back. Think back to Farida at 24, when she had a job offer in another city. A real one. The kind of opportunity that changes the direction of a life. She turned it down. Why? Because Della had a health scare. Chest pains, hospital overnight, nothing serious in the end, but the timing was extraordinary. Think back to Farida at 27, the boyfriend before Kofi. Serious. The kind of serious where you start quietly imagining a future. He had met Della twice. The third time was supposed to be a family dinner. 2 days before, Della had a fall. Nothing broken, but she needed someone with her. Farida stayed. The boyfriend waited. And then he didn't. Della had never once manufactured a crisis during a calm period of Farida's life. Only ever at the exact moment Farida was about to leave. Farida is only now beginning to count the cost of that pattern. She doesn't have the full picture yet, but she has enough. Enough to do something she has not done in 6 weeks of living inside this house. She picks up the phone. Not to call Kofi, to call the hospital. She has a question, a simple one. The kind of question a devoted daughter asks when she's trying to understand her mother's care. The answer she gets is not simple at all. What would you have done in that moment? Called the hospital or walked away and kept the peace? Tell me in the comments. Because what the hospital tells her doesn't just pull one thread, it unravels the whole thing. She doesn't call the main line. That was Farida's first instinct. Call the hospital, ask for oncology, ask about her mother's case. But she has enough presence of mind to know that they won't tell her anything specific. Patient privacy. She knows the walls those words build. So she thinks. And then she remembers something. 6 weeks ago, the night of the diagnosis, Della had mentioned a name, a consultant. She'd said it once, in passing, the kind of detail you drop to make something feel real. Farida hadn't needed to hold on to it. It had landed because it was specific, and specific things feel true. She calls the hospital and asks to be connected to that consultant's secretary. The phone rings 4 times. Someone picks up. Farida gives her name, gives her mother's name, says she's calling as next of kin. Says she just wants to understand the care plan a little better. She's been trying to support her mother through this, and she wants to make sure she's doing it right. There is a pause. Typing. A longer pause. I'm sorry, the secretary says. I don't have a patient by that name under this consultant. Farida keeps her voice even. She spells the surname. She gives the date of birth. Another pause. We have a record of a referral from about 2 years ago, the secretary says, but there's nothing active, no treatment plan with us. She'd have to be referred again to be seen. Farida thanks her. She hangs up. She sits in the car. She had driven around the corner to make the call, some instinct for distance, and she stares at the road in front of her and she breathes. No treatment plan. No active case. No dying. Here is what that information does to a person who has loved someone their whole life. It doesn't arrive cleanly. It doesn't slot in and make everything make sense in one smooth motion. It comes in pieces, and each piece has to be turned over, and each one catches the light differently, and none of them are easy. Because if Della is not sick, and she is not sick, then every single thing that has happened in the last 6 weeks is something Farida has to look at differently. Every meal she cooked, every appointment she sat through, every call with Kofi where she said, "Not yet, just a little longer, I can't leave her yet." Every version of herself she set down to pick up the role her mother needed her to play. She drives back to the house. She parks. She sits outside for 11 minutes. She knows exactly how long because she watches the clock and she makes herself breathe through every single one of them before she goes inside. Della is in the kitchen. She has made tea. She often makes tea in the late afternoon. This is not new. But today there is something different about the way she looks up when Farida walks in. A flicker. Something behind her eyes that is not quite guilt and not quite confidence. Animals feel when the energy shifts. Della has always been very good at reading rooms. She knows something has changed. She just doesn't know how much. And so she does what Della has always done when she senses the ground moving. She performs. That evening, right after dinner, Della pushes back from the table and reaches for the counter. A sharp intake of breath. A hand pressed to her side. The exact geography of pain. Winced, not announced, the way a proud woman in genuine agony would try to hide it. "I'm fine," she says, before Farida has even asked. "I'm fine. Don't fuss." And 6 weeks ago, even 6 days ago, Farida would have been across the room in seconds. Tonight, she watches from the other side of the table. She watches, and she does not move, and she keeps her face in exactly the shape of a daughter who believes what she is seeing. Because she has just understood something about her mother that she cannot afford to show yet. Della is watching her too. Della is checking, always checking, whether the story is still holding. It needs to still be holding for now, just a little longer. Because Farida has made a decision. She is not going to confront her mother with a phone call from a secretary. That is not enough. Della would explain it away. Wrong department, another hospital, private clinic, a misunderstanding. She would have an answer before the question finished landing, because that is who Della is. Farida needs something Della cannot explain away. She needs the truth from someone her mother didn't think to prepare. And she knows exactly who that person is. She's been avoiding calling her for 6 weeks, because calling her means admitting something Farida wasn't ready to admit. She's ready now. Her name is Rochelle, Della's younger sister, Farida's aunt. The woman who used to come for Christmas and then, gradually, didn't. Who sent birthday cards that arrived a week late and called on the wrong day and eventually stopped calling at all. Farida had grown up hearing her mother describe Rochelle as difficult, ungrateful, a woman who had taken everything Della gave her and decided it wasn't enough. She had believed it. Of course she had believed it. She calls Rochelle from the same corner she drove to the day before. Engine running. Hands that are steadier than she expects them to be. Rochelle picks up on the second ring. There is a pause when Farida says her name. Not a cold pause. The pause of someone who is recalibrating, who is deciding in real time how much to give and how much to protect. "Farida," Rochelle says, and then, "What did she do?" Not, "Is everything okay?" Not, "What a lovely surprise." Straight to the question. Because Rochelle already knows the shape of this call. She has been waiting for it for years. Farida tells her. All of it. The diagnosis, the postponed wedding, the 6 weeks, the 8 words, the hospital. She tells it quickly and without editorializing because she needs to know if she is losing her mind before she does anything else. Rochelle is quiet for a moment. "She did the same thing to me," she says, "when I got the job in Edinburgh. 22 years ago. Rochelle had been offered a position that would have changed everything, the kind of offer that comes once. She had been packed, ready, 2 weeks from leaving. And then Della sat her down and told her the doctors had found something, that she was scared, that she couldn't face it without Rochelle there. Rochelle stayed. She turned down the job. She gave Della 8 months of her life, cooking, caring, sitting in waiting rooms that Rochelle now understands Della had no business sitting in. And then Della recovered, quietly, without drama, as if the illness had simply decided to leave on its own. Rochelle had been so relieved that she hadn't let herself be angry. Not at first. But the anger came later, when she finally understood what had been taken from her. When she tried to talk to Della about it, and Della looked at her with such genuine, wounded confusion. How could you suggest such a thing, after everything I went through? That Rochelle had walked out of that house and never fully walked back in. She called me difficult, Rochelle says. Made sure everyone knew I'd abandoned her when she was sick. It's a very clean story. Hard to argue with. Farida is gripping the steering wheel. She asks the question she needs to ask. Why didn't you warn me? Rochelle is quiet for a long time. I tried, she says. Once. When you first got serious with Kofi. You told me I'd never understood your mother, that I had my own issues to deal with. Farida remembers the conversation. She remembers dismissing it. She remembers repeating it to Della afterward, and Della's soft, pained sigh, and the way Della had said, "Some people cannot stand to see you loved, baby." She had handed her mother the information. Della had used it to close the last door. Farida drives home. She walks into the house. She is calm. She is so calm it almost frightens her. She sets her bag down. She says she has a headache. She is going to lie down. And Della looks at her with those careful, reading eyes and says, "Of course, rest. I'll check on you later." She does not lie down. She sits on the edge of the bed and she thinks about Kofi, about what he is doing right now, in the flat they chose together, in the life that has been on hold for 6 weeks. She picks up her phone to call him. There is already a missed call, from 40 minutes ago. Not from Kofi, from Kofi's mother. Farida stares at it. Kofi's mother has never called her directly, not once in 3 years. They are warm, they are cordial, but they are not phone call people. Not yet. Not without Kofi in the middle of it. She calls back. It rings twice. Kofi's mother answers, and her voice is careful, in the way voices get careful when someone has been put in a position they didn't ask to be in. "I wanted to call you myself," she says, "before you heard it another way." Farida's chest goes cold. "Your mother called Kofi this morning." The pause that follows is the kind that changes the shape of a room. She told him you've been struggling, that you've been saying things, that you're not sure about the wedding, that she's worried about your state of mind. Della hadn't waited for the confrontation. She had gone straight for the one thing she knew would do the most damage. She had gone for Kofi. Farida doesn't sleep that night. She lies in the dark in her childhood room, and she listens to the house, the settling of it, the familiar sounds she has known her whole life, the pipes, the floorboards, the way the wind catches the back gate. She has always found this house comforting. She understands now that comfort and safety are not the same thing, and she has been confusing them for 31 years. At 7 in the morning, she gets up. She showers, she dresses, she goes downstairs. Della is already in the kitchen. Farida sits across from her at the table, the same table where the diagnosis was delivered, where every careful, managed conversation of the last 6 weeks has taken place. And she looks at her mother and she says, "I spoke to the hospital." Della's hands go still around her mug. 1 second. 2. And then, and this is the part Farida will think about for a long time afterward, Della doesn't ask which hospital. She doesn't ask what they said. She doesn't say, "and?" or "what do you mean?" in the way a woman with nothing to hide would say it. She says, "I can explain." 3 words, an admission dressed as a defense. Farida lets the silence sit. "I was going to tell you," Della says. Her voice is shifting now, finding the register. Not the sick register, not the tired register, the wounded one. The one that says, "Look what you're doing to me." The diagnosis, it wasn't as clear-cut as I made it sound. I panicked. I was scared and I panicked, and I said more than I should have. I never meant for it to go this far. She had. She absolutely had. But Farida doesn't say that. She waits. "And you and Kofi," Della's eyes fill, on command, the way they always have. "I only called him because I was worried about you. You haven't been yourself. Anyone could see it." "I haven't been myself," Farida says, "because I've been here, caring for someone who isn't sick." Della flinches. Then she reaches across the table. "I am your mother, Everything I have ever done has been for you. You know that. You know me. And there it is, the last move, the oldest move, the one that has worked every single time before. Because it is true, technically. Della is her mother. Della did work 2 jobs. Della did build something out of nothing. All of that is real. But so is Rochelle in Edinburgh 22 years ago, turning down the job. So is the boyfriend at 27, who waited and then didn't. So is Kofi in their flat right now, with his mother's careful voice still in his ears. Farida stands up. She doesn't raise her voice, she doesn't cry. She has done her crying, alone in this room, in this house, for 6 weeks. She is finished with crying inside these walls. I know you, she says. That's the problem. She goes upstairs. She packs 1 bag, just what she needs for now. The rest can wait. She comes back down. Della is standing in the hallway. Her face has moved through wounded and arrived somewhere harder. The performance has dropped just slightly, just enough for Farida to see the woman underneath it, the woman who miscalculated. Farida opens the front door. I love you, she says, because she does. God help her, she does. But I'm not coming back. She drives to Kofi. He opens the door before she reaches it. His mother had called him after she'd called Farida. He already knew the shape of what was coming. He stands in the doorway and he looks at her, really looks at her. And he doesn't say, I told you so, because he is not that kind of man. He says, come inside. They don't fix everything that morning. That is not how it works. There are conversations ahead of them that will be hard, questions Kofi has that Farida will need to sit with, losses that don't have clean edges. The wedding will happen. It will happen, she knows that now. But the version of her that walks toward it will be different from the one who was 3 weeks away from it 6 months ago. That woman still believed that love meant making yourself available to be hurt by the people who claim to love you. This one knows better. Here is what I want to leave you with. The hardest grief in this story isn't the wedding that got postponed. It isn't the 6 weeks or the job Rochelle didn't take or any of the concrete things that were lost. The hardest grief is the one Farida has to carry quietly, mourning a mother who is still alive, still calling, still fully convinced that what she did was love. Some people will hurt you from a place of genuine fear. Fear of being left, fear of being alone, fear of becoming irrelevant in your life. That doesn't make it love. Fear dressed up as love is still fear, and you are not obligated to stay inside it just because the person wearing it gave birth to you. You are allowed to love someone and still refuse to be managed by them. You are allowed to see clearly and still grieve what the seeing costs you. You are allowed to leave. If there's someone in your life who only seems to need you at the exact moment you're about to step into something good, I want you to think about that timing. Not with anger, just with honesty. Because the pattern was always there. You just needed permission to trust what you already saw. That's why we're here. That's what the Firelight is for. For the next story, we're going somewhere darker. A friendship that looked like loyalty for a decade. And the one conversation that revealed it never was. You won't want to miss it. You are not too much. They were just not enough. You were never too sensitive. The room was just never safe enough.